I was 19 years old the day my father looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Take your suitcase and get out. From this moment on, you're no longer my son." I thought he was joking. I waited for him to smile. He never did. Instead, he pointed toward the front door while my stepmother stood behind him with the biggest smile I had ever seen. My little half-brother watched from the staircase without saying a word. Everything I owned in this world fit inside one old blue suitcase. Some clothes, a few books, a family photo of my mother, and exactly $83 in my wallet. That was all I had. The rain was pouring outside as I slowly picked up my suitcase. I stopped at the door. I turned around one last time. "Dad, please, I have nowhere to go." He didn't even look at me. He simply said, "Not my problem anymore." Then, the door slammed shut behind me. That sound echoed inside my head for years. I stood there in the rain, homeless, heartbroken, completely alone. The hardest part wasn't losing the house. It was realizing I had already lost my family. My mother had died when I was 10 years old. She was the kindest person I had ever known. Before she passed away, she held my hand and whispered, "Promise me you'll always stay kind, no matter what happens." I promised her. For 2 years after her death, my father and I were close. Then he met Linda. Everything changed. At first, she acted sweet. She bought me birthday presents, cooked my favorite meals, called me her son. But after she married my father, the mask disappeared. Suddenly, everything became my fault. If dishes weren't washed, it was my fault. If my little brother broke something, it was my fault. If money was tight, it was somehow my fault. Every day she whispered things into my father's ear. Slowly, he stopped believing me. Then he stopped talking to me. Eventually, he stopped loving me. Or at least, that's how it felt. I worked after school every evening, bagging groceries at a local supermarket. I gave almost every paycheck to my father because he always said, "We're struggling. We all have to sacrifice." I believed him. I never complained. I wore the same shoes until the soles had holes. I skipped school trips. I skipped birthday parties. Every dollar I earned went into the family. Then one afternoon, everything exploded. I came home after work. Linda was standing in the kitchen holding an empty jewelry box. Her face was full of fake tears. She screamed, "My necklace is gone." My father looked at me. "Did you take it?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What? No." Linda cried even louder. "Who else could have taken it? You were the only one home this morning." I kept shaking my head. "I swear I didn't touch it." My father searched my bedroom, opened every drawer, emptied my backpack, threw my clothes across the floor. He found nothing. Because there was nothing to find, I thought that would prove my innocence. Instead, Linda quietly said, "He probably sold it already." That was enough. My father exploded. He grabbed my arm, dragged me downstairs, and shouted, "I've had enough of your lies." I begged him to listen. He wouldn't. 10 minutes later, everything I owned was sitting on the front porch, including that old blue suitcase. As I stood outside in the rain, I reached into my pocket. There was one photograph left. It was the last picture of my mother holding my hand. I stared at it for a long time. Then I quietly said, "I kept my promise, Mom. I stayed kind, even when nobody was kind to me." That night, I slept on a wooden bench at the city bus station. The cold was unbearable. I barely slept. Around 3 in the morning, an elderly janitor walked over. He looked at my suitcase, then at me. "You got kicked out?" I nodded. He sat beside me without asking another question. After a minute, he handed me a hot cup of coffee. "I've been where you are." Those simple words almost made me cry. Before leaving, he slipped something into my hand. A folded business card. "Come here tomorrow morning. They're looking for warehouse workers. It's hard work, but it's honest work." The next morning, I walked 3 miles to the address. The warehouse manager looked at me. "You have experience?" "No." "You willing to work 12 hours a day?" "Yes." "You willing to start right now?" "Yes." He smiled. "You're hired." That tiny job, changed my life. I swept floors, loaded trucks, cleaned equipment, worked every overtime shift they offered. I never missed a day, never complained. Every paycheck, I saved, every single dollar. 3 years later, I became a supervisor. 5 years later, I managed the entire warehouse. People started respecting me, not because of where I came from, because of how hard I worked. Then, one afternoon, something happened that would change my future forever. The company owner unexpectedly visited our warehouse. He watched me working without introducing himself. For nearly an hour, he quietly observed everything. At the end of the shift, he walked over, extended his hand. "My name is Richard Collins. I'm the owner. I've been watching you. I think you're wasting your talent here." I had no idea that meeting would eventually make me a millionaire. And 10 years after my father threw me out with one suitcase, the same man would stand on my front porch, begging me for a second chance. When Richard Collins told me I was wasting my talent, I honestly thought he was joking. After all, I was just a warehouse supervisor. I wore steel-toe boots, worked 12-hour shifts, loaded trucks, checked inventory. Nothing special. Richard smiled. "Come to my office Monday morning. I want to show you something." For the entire weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about those words. Monday finally arrived. His office overlooked the entire city. Glass walls, modern furniture, the kind of place I had only seen in magazines. Richard handed me a folder. Inside were reports from every warehouse the company owned. "I've watched you for months," he said. "Your warehouse has the lowest employee turnover, the highest productivity, and the fewest mistakes." I looked at him, confused. I was only doing my job. He smiled. "Exactly. Most people only work for a paycheck. You work like you actually care." That single sentence stayed with me forever. Then he surprised me again. "I want you to enter our management training program." I couldn't believe it. "Me?" He nodded. "You've earned it." For the next 2 years, my life completely changed. During the day, I managed the warehouse. At night, I studied finance, business management, leadership, negotiation. I barely slept, but I loved every minute. One evening, Richard invited me to dinner. Halfway through the meal, he asked, "Tell me about your family." I became quiet. "I don't really have one anymore." He didn't interrupt. For the first time, I told someone everything. My mother's death, my stepmother, the false accusation, the suitcase, the night at the bus station. When I finished, Richard remained silent for several seconds. Then he quietly said, "They didn't lose a son, they lost a good man." No one had ever said something like that to me before. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Months passed. Then one Friday morning, Richard called me into his office. "I'm retiring." I smiled. "You deserve it." He laughed. "I'm not done helping you." He slid another folder across the desk. Inside was an offer. Vice President of Operations. I stared at the paper. My salary was more money than my father earned in 5 years. I almost couldn't speak. Richard smiled. "You built this. You earned this. You deserve this." I accepted immediately. Over the next 4 years, the company expanded across 3 states. Every warehouse became profitable. New locations opened every year. Richard slowly stepped back. One afternoon, he called me again. "I've decided to sell the company." The news shocked everyone. Several investment firms made offers. Finally, one international corporation agreed to buy everything. The sale was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. When everything was finalized, Richard invited me into his office one last time. He handed me another envelope. I promised I'd always reward loyalty. Inside were ownership documents. Richard had quietly given me shares in the company years earlier. Shares I never knew existed. Those shares were now worth over $27 million. My hands started shaking. "I can't accept this." Richard smiled. "Yes, you can. I've never had children. If I had a son, I would have wanted him to become the man you've become." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I hugged him. He wasn't my biological father, but he had become everything my real father never was. Over the next year, I invested carefully. Real estate, warehouses, logistics companies. My wealth continued growing, but I never forgot where I came from. Every winter, I donated coats to homeless shelters. Every Christmas, I secretly paid off medical bills for struggling families. Every year, I visited the same bus station where I had once slept with my old blue suitcase. I never forgot that frightened 19-year-old boy. Then, exactly 10 years after my father threw me out, life came full circle. It was a rainy Tuesday evening. I had just returned home from work. My assistant called through the intercom. "Sir, there is an older man at the gate. He says he's your father." My heart stopped. I walked to the security camera. There he was, older, gray hair, wrinkled face, wearing cheap clothes, standing beside a worn-out suitcase. The same kind of suitcase I had carried 10 years earlier. For several seconds, I simply stared at the screen. Then, he looked directly into the camera. His eyes filled with tears, and he quietly whispered, "Please, I have nowhere else to go." I closed my eyes, because I knew the hardest decision of my life was standing outside my front gate for nearly a minute. I stood in front of the security monitor. My father looked nothing like the man I remembered. His expensive truck was gone. His tailored clothes had been replaced by an old faded jacket. His shoulders were bent. His eyes looked tired. Beside him was one old suitcase. The irony wasn't lost on me. 10 years earlier, I had stood outside his house with one suitcase. Now, he was standing outside mine. I pressed the intercom. "What do you want?" His voice cracked. "Please, I just want 5 minutes. I don't deserve it, but please." I remained silent. Finally, I opened the gate. When he walked inside, he looked around in disbelief. The gardens were perfectly maintained. Luxury cars sat quietly in the driveway. Everything I owned had been built through years of hard work. Nothing had been handed to me. He stopped walking. "I never imagined you'd become this successful." I looked at him calmly. "You never imagined I'd survive." He lowered his head. We sat across from each other in the living room. Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry. I had imagined hearing those words for years, but somehow, they didn't feel the way I thought they would." I asked the only question that mattered. Why did you throw me away?" His hands began shaking. "It wasn't because of the necklace." I stared at him. "I knew you didn't steal it." My heart stopped. "What?" He closed his eyes. "I knew you were innocent." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Then why? He covered his face. "Linda gave me an ultimatum. She said if I chose you, she would leave and she'd take Ryan with her." I was weak. I chose the wrong family. For years, I had blamed myself. Now, I discovered the truth. He had sacrificed his own son, simply because he was afraid of being alone. I stood up and walked toward the window. I couldn't even look at him. After several minutes, I quietly asked, "What happened?" His voice was barely audible. "Everything. Ryan convinced me to mortgage the house. He wanted to start a business. It failed. Then another. It failed too. We borrowed more money. Then Linda started gambling." I slowly turned around. "Gambling?" He nodded. "At first it was casinos, then online gambling. She lost hundreds of thousands of dollars." I couldn't believe it. The woman who once accused me of stealing had destroyed the family herself. He continued. "We sold the house, the cars, the land, everything. Ryan disappeared 6 months ago. No calls, no messages, nothing." "What about Linda?" A tear rolled down his face. "She left me the moment the money ran out." The room became completely silent. For the first time, I saw a broken old man, not the angry father I remembered, just a lonely man, living with the consequences of his own choices. Then he slowly reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small envelope. "I've carried this for 10 years. I opened it. Inside was the photograph of my mother, the same picture I thought I had lost forever. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, were 7 words, Always choose kindness over bitterness, my son. Tears filled my eyes. I gently held the photograph against my chest. Then my father quietly said something I never expected. There's one more thing. Something I've hidden from you your entire life. I looked at him. What are you talking about? He swallowed hard. The woman you called mom. The woman who raised you. She left something behind before she died. A letter. I was too ashamed to give it to you. He reached into his suitcase, pulled out a small wooden box, and placed it on the table. My hands began trembling, because I knew whatever was inside that box was about to change everything I believed about my family. I stared at the small wooden box for several seconds. Neither of us moved. My father slowly pushed it across the table. I've carried this for 16 years. I never had the courage to give it to you. My hands trembled as I opened the lid. Inside there was an old silver necklace, my mother's wedding ring, and a sealed envelope. Across the front, in my mother's handwriting, were 4 words, "For my son." Tears immediately filled my eyes. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a 3-page handwritten letter. I took a deep breath and began reading. My sweet boy, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. I wish I could watch you grow into a man. But life had different plans. I know your father loves you, but I also know he is easily influenced. If he ever forgets what truly matters, please don't let his mistakes define your future. I stopped reading for a moment. I looked at my father. He couldn't even raise his head. I continued. You were born with a good heart. Never let bitterness steal your kindness. One day, people who hurt you may come back. When that day comes, you must decide what kind of man you want to be. I couldn't stop crying. Every word felt as if she were sitting beside me. The final page read, I have left one final gift for you. It isn't money. It isn't jewelry. It's hidden where your father will one day remember. When the time is right, he will know. I looked up. What does this mean? My father wiped away his tears. I know exactly what she meant. The next morning, we drove together. For the first time in 16 years, the silence between us was almost unbearable. 2 hours later, we arrived at the small white church where my parents had been married. Behind the church stood an enormous oak tree. My father slowly walked toward it. He knelt beside the roots, then began digging with his hands. After several minutes, his fingers hit something hard, a small rusted metal box. He carefully lifted it out. The lock had almost completely rusted away. Inside were several documents, old family photographs, and a bank envelope. My father stared at it in disbelief. I completely forgot. My mother had secretly opened an investment account years before she died. Every birthday, every Christmas, she quietly deposited money into it. Not for herself, for me. The account had never been touched, because nobody knew it existed, not even my father. We immediately drove to the bank. The manager carefully reviewed the documents, then smiled. The account is still active. After years of investment growth, the balance today is, she looked up from her computer, $3,482,000. My father burst into tears. I failed you. Your mother never did. I smiled through my own tears. It isn't about the money. It never was. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. Finally, my father quietly asked, is there any chance that one day you might forgive me? Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was my assistant. Her voice sounded urgent. Sir, I think you should turn on the news. I opened the live stream. Breaking news flashed across the screen. 2 FBI agents were leading someone out of a luxury casino in handcuffs. I looked closer. My heart stopped. It was Linda, my former stepmother. The reporter spoke. Federal investigators allege she operated a large, financial fraud scheme that stole millions from elderly victims. I slowly lowered the phone. Then another name appeared in the report. Ryan. He was officially wanted by federal authorities for helping hide the stolen money. My father covered his face. I created this. I ignored every warning. I destroyed my own family. I looked out the window. For years, I thought karma would arrive with anger. Instead, It arrived with truth, and the biggest surprise was still waiting for all of us for several minutes. Neither of us said a single word. The television continued showing images of Linda being led into a police car. Ryan's face appeared beside hers. Wanted by the FBI. My father sat down slowly. He looked 20 years older. I spent my whole life protecting the wrong people. I looked at him quietly. You didn't protect them. You abandoned the person who truly loved you. He closed his eyes. I know. A week later, federal investigators contacted me. They had discovered something unexpected. Ryan had been hiding stolen money inside several fake companies. One of those companies had been registered using my father's identity. My father was devastated. I didn't even know. Fortunately, the investigators quickly confirmed he wasn't involved. He had simply been manipulated. Ryan and Linda had used him exactly the way they had once used me. 3 months later, the trial finally began. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every seat. The judge carefully reviewed thousands of pages of evidence, bank transfers, fake companies, casino records, witness testimony. Everything pointed to one conclusion. Linda had stolen millions from elderly investors. Ryan had helped hide the money. When the verdict was announced, neither of them showed any emotion. Linda was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Ryan received 9 years for financial fraud and money laundering. As they were led away, Ryan turned toward my father. Dad, help me. My father slowly shook his head. No, I already ruined one child's life. I won't ruin another by protecting his crimes. For the first time, he chose what was right instead of what was easy. Months passed. Life slowly returned to normal. One evening, my father came to my office. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking for a place to live. Instead, he placed a folded piece of paper on my desk. What is this? He smiled. The deed. I opened it. He had transferred the small cabin he still owned into my name. I know it isn't much, but it's all I have left. I gently pushed the papers back. I don't want your property. He looked confused. I only wanted my father. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then for the first time since I was 19, he hugged me and quietly whispered, I'm so sorry, son. That moment didn't erase the past. It didn't erase the pain, but it finally ended the anger. Over the next few years, we slowly rebuilt our relationship. Every Sunday, we had breakfast together. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we simply sat in silence. Neither of us needed many words anymore. One spring morning, I took him to visit my mother's grave. We placed fresh white lilies beside her headstone. He knelt down. His voice trembled. I failed you. I failed our son. But he became a better man than I ever deserved. As we walked away, I looked at the sky. For years, I believed success meant becoming wealthy. I was wrong. Success wasn't the company I built. It wasn't the millions in my bank account. It wasn't the house. Success was standing beside the father who once threw me away, knowing I had broken the cycle of hate. A year later, I was invited to speak at a national leadership conference. More than 6,000 people filled the auditorium. The host asked me one question. What is the greatest lesson you've ever learned? I smiled, then answered, people can take away your home. They can take away your family. They can even leave you with nothing but one old suitcase. But they can never take away your character, because real wealth isn't measured by what you own. It's measured by who you become after losing everything. The audience stood and applauded. As I walked off the stage, I quietly looked toward the sky. In my heart, I whispered, I kept my promise, Mom, and I finally became the man you always believed I could be.